Good morning, everybody. Welcome to the first ever Discovery Day online from the Alf Museum of Paleontology. I am your host, Collections Manager and Outreach Coordinator for the Alf Museum, Gabriel Santos. And today we are going to be looking at how art and science work together to create some of the coolest illustrations out there, from science fiction and fantasy to the latest scientific discoveries. And we're going to be meeting a lot of the really cool science illustrators who do that. This morning, I am very, very excited to start the day with science illustrator and most recent Alf Museum science illustration intern, Hannah Caisse. Hello, Hannah.
Hello, good morning.
Good morning. How are you doing today?
I'm good. I really enjoy Saturday mornings. It's kind of nice to just kind of have this event going on one of my favorite days. It's nice. It's very nice.
Awesome. It's like a really nice chill day where you're gonna do a little bit of an art demo for us and talk a little bit about your like work and your method, right?
Yeah. And I'm really excited to be with you guys and to share my process essentially because I love science illustration and also making these awesome creatures. I'm all about that.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Let me introduce all of you to Hannah a little bit more. So, Hannah is a well rounded and certified science illustrator with a bachelor's degree in evolution and ecology. Hannah's interests are in vertebrate anatomy, mammalogy, herpetology, etc., but she is especially passionate about paleontology. Woo. Her favorite part of the process when rendering extinct species is the close correspondence between them and the experts to make sure that the renditions of the creature are as close to the current literature as possible. Hannah closely follows any new publications in paleontology, and she endeavors to stay up to date using digital paintings on Photoshop, vector diagrams on Illustrator, and traditional media experimentation. Really cool stuff, Hannah. So you were recently a Alf Museum science illustration intern for us over last year, correct?
Yeah, that's correct. Back in the fall.
So how was that for you, getting to, create science illustrations for a museum? Have you done stuff like that before?
No, so basically, I got this illustration through my graduate program at Cal State Monterey Bay. And so essentially, before you get your graduate certification, you have to take an internship it could be like with another person or just a museum, an institution, kind of anywhere where your interests lie. And so right going into my science illustration grad program, I was already so about paleontology. And so like all the people in my class were like, "Oh, paleontology. Well, that's Hannah's topic." My teachers turned me on to the Alf Museum because there's a lot of people from the Cal State Monterey Bay grad program that go to the Alf Museum to fulfill their internship. and we'll see them today later, which I'm really excited about. And so I'm basically like the youngest out of the most recent out of the Alf Museum interns. And so I got in touch with Dr. Andy Farkey, who works at the museum, and he's really awesome. And so I got in, I got the internship, but then pandemic. And so unfortunately, while other people in the past were able to go to the Alf Museum for their internship, I had to take mine remotely, which, was a letdown, but I still had so much fun and I learned so much from this remote experience to just like learn how to talk to the experts, being Andy and other people he'd introduce me to, and just kind of like get the current literature and like the proper way to visualize these creatures and extinct species that were in the projects. And so like I my first project was doing the Leptoceratops, and that was so much fun. And I was really excited because they used that Leptoceratops and they put it on the Alf Museum magazine. No, actually, sorry, the Web Schools magazine,
Yeah, they did.
which is where the Alf is on that campus. And I was just like, oh my gosh, what? So, anyways, I had a really great time and I learned so much, and I was just really honored to be included in the process.
That's fantastic. I mean,
Yeah.
for me, I always love having the interns come to the museum because, I love art. I consider myself a bit of a graphic designer, but, I can't draw for to save my life, honestly. So having, all of you science illustrators come to the museum is such a fun experience for me too as a scientist, and getting to see the process, which is exactly what you're going to do for us today, right? You're going to do a science or an art demo.
Yeah, so basically I'm just kind of going to relay the process that I do for each and every illustration that comes my way. Um, this is basically my process, and I'm showing you guys a Photoshop painting of the process, but that my process also can be like this. I can apply to a pen and ink drawing, or like a acrylic painting, or colored pencils. Like it's basically the science illustration process, at least the way that I do it. And there's other science illustrators that might be different, but I think that there's a common theme throughout.
Awesome. Okay, well, we'll let you get started. So, everyone joining us from home, those of you in the chat, Hannah will be doing her art demo, and afterward, we're going to do an open Q&A where you can ask questions. During the presentation, you can go ahead and type your questions in the chat, and I'll make sure I ask them once Hannah is done. So, everyone, here we go. And you're good to go, Hannah.
All right, thanks, Gabe. Okay, so today I'm going to walk you through my process of science illustration and what I do when I approach an illustration. And so essentially, science illustration is different from your typical illustration. And I say typical being like, a lot of artists, when they create pieces, it comes from their mind and it's using creativity and how they feel. And I love that. But science illustration is based in scientific fact. And so research is absolutely essential and necessary when you approach your illustrations in science illustration. And so technically for this illustration, um, I've been thinking about this particular illustration for a while, and uh, and I've been thinking about it because I saw a article in January, because I like to, as Gabe said, I like to stay on top of the art scientific articles that are coming in, and you can bet that there's all the new science coming in every week, and it's really cool. And so I go to Science News, which is an online website, and specifically, I go on to their paleontology page. And so there was an article in January that talked about how saber-toothed cats were likely dependent on their adults and into teenagerdom, essentially. So, like these adolescents still hanging out with their their parents or their familial groups like way into their older, like I'd say like 2 to 3 years. That's what it said. And so I wondered, so there's there's kind of like a common idea of when you think of a saber-toothed cat, you think, oh, like a ferocious, like a ferocious cat that'll eat you if you time traveled back into the ice ages and the Pleistocene. Oh, you'll get eaten by this big cat. And that's true, but like there's complexity to every monster. And so today, especially with the title of Making Monsters, I just want to like show that yes, like saber-toothed cats are sort of like monsters, but monsters that have complexity. And so what I mean by complexity is that they're not just scary and ferocious, they have, you know, they take care of their babies for quite a long time and much longer than modern cats today. Um, and so basically, I wanted to show the juxtaposition of showing a fierce Smilodon fatalis, a saber-toothed cat, with her cubs. And so basically, I thought to myself, all right, so I want to do a drawing or a painting of a mother saber-toothed cat and her babies. What do I do next? And the answer is research. And that does sound kind of boring, but it's so important. And so I researched this for almost 2 hours and I came up with, well, first I started with questions. And so I already have a background in science. And so I asked myself in my scientific brain, I asked, so what is the life history of Smilodon fatalis? And life history meaning when it's born to when it becomes an adult. And so that would help me to inform me about the cubs, like when they get born, what happens, and when do they have their teeth grown in. And so that was one thing that I saw from, and part of the research is seeing how other people do it. And so I know that the king of saber-toothed cat illustrations is Mauricio Antone or Antone. And so his depictions of these awesome cats is so great, but he doesn't have any pictures of like baby cubs. And that is a thing because there isn't a lot of research for baby cubs because there isn't a lot of fossils of saber-toothed cat cubs. But you can make inferences backwards from a teenager saber-toothed cat to the baby. But anyways, so I asked myself, when do the canines come in? Because I saw other illustrations of people with saber-toothed cats and their cubs, but the cubs had canines coming in. And I saw that actually their canines don't come in for 15 months. So I thought that was crazy. And so you get all these great facts from research that inform the way that you approach your illustration. Like, for instance, when you look at the cat, you have to think about camouflage. And how would this cat camouflage? Would it have stripes like a tiger? Would it have spots like a jaguar? And you can inference these things by the ecology of the region. And so I researched Los Angeles ecology and whatever. And so I kind of went with, because the ecology was about the same as it is today, except maybe a little bit more rain. So I went with the camouflage of more of like a mountain lion, because there's a lot of mountain lions still in Los Angeles and California. And I really liked the camouflage of that and maybe incorporated a little bit more red because it was pretty. And so essentially, after I felt really comfortable with all of my research, then I started with the illustration. And so you have to be really comfortable first with the research. And also you might research kind of weird things to like answer questions in your mind. Like I always make a joke about like, oh, like what if people went through my search history or whatever? They'll just see that I searched weird images like chicken feet or like a turkey eye. Like why was I searching that? Well, it's because maybe I was doing illustrations of dinosaurs or relations to very early relations of the chicken and turkey. And I kind of wanted to be like, well, what would a dinosaur eye look like? Kind of like a turkey eye? Kind of has chicken feet? But anyways, so essentially with this illustration, I felt really comfortable going forward with the illustration, with the research that I had done. And so I wanted to show you what I'm working with here, especially for Photoshop illustrations. So I think you can see my screen right now. And so what you see is my Cintiq 16-inch. And so it's a Wacom Cintiq. And so it's pretty wide. And basically, instead of having the tablet down here and then the monitor up here, and you draw kind of blindly like this, you draw directly onto the screen. And I really like that more because I don't like the whole disjointed drawing sense. And then for my drawing apparatus, I have the Pro Pen 2. I'll hold it like a YouTuber. Yeah, Pro Pen 2. And I also got the Express Key remote. So that's what it looks like. I don't know if you can see it that well, but so basically I get this remote, which kind of makes my process a little bit faster. And so instead of me doing an illustration and then I don't like that brush stroke, I want to undo it. I want to get rid of it. And so instead of me going up to edit, undo, I can have a hotkey on here and I can just press a little button and then it's an undo. And so if I have a whole section that I was like, I don't like it, I can just go undo, 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 undo. Or I can toggle between screens. It's really helpful and move around with it. And I also, you've probably been noticing that I have this weird black thing on my hand. And no, it's not a fashion piece. This is a frictionless glove. And so a lot of digital illustrators or people who work with these kinds of tablets, the constant movement of the flat of your hand across the screen causes friction. And it can lead to problems, especially in your shoulder and generally in injuries that you can avoid if you have a frictionless glove. So you can just move your hand across and it's not going to mess up your arm because your arm and your hand are really important, especially if you're an illustrator. Okay, so I'll jump into my file here. So as you can see, I'm going to kind of backtrack and show you guys how I started. So I'm going to turn off all of these layers. And so what I'm pressing is the visibility, the little eye icon over here. And so that means that you can see it or you can't. It's pretty straightforward for that. And I will say that Photoshop is the industry standard for science illustration in digital terms, in digital painting terms. Basically, the whole Adobe suite is really integral if you want to jump into digital art in general. And digital art is becoming really key in science illustration these days. And I have a few ideas why. I think it's easier to kind of send, and also it just has a very cool look. And you can also replicate a lot of traditional media, but in a digital format, and it cuts a lot of time and expense. And so people really like digital art for that reason. And so Photoshop in that sense is really important. So anyways, basically whenever I start a digital illustration, I start with the sketch, as you do. And so this was the sketch I landed on. And so basically from my research, I did a lot of research looking into the anatomy of a saber-toothed cat, specifically Smilodon fatalis. And so obviously you don't have pictures of these cats because they're not alive anymore. But there are descendants of saber-toothed cats that are alive today, like lions or at least not descendants, but relatives. Lions and mountain lions and pumas and whatever. And so I use images like that on Google, but I do not copy any images directly, because that is a big no-no. It's not like I will see, ooh, like this really cool illustration of a lion, and I'm going to just copy it and then add saber teeth on it. Don't do that, because you are infringing on the other person's photo, especially if they have copyright and licensing attached to it. So what you want to do, well, one of the things you could do is find images like on Flickr that do not have any known copyright restrictions. And so then you can copy from those. But what I do is I take pictures, screenshots of images that I think would be beneficial to me, and I take multiple screenshots of different anatomies, different body parts. So the image that I took a screenshot of is right here of one image, and then I took another screenshot of the neck from another image, and then I took a screenshot of the face of the little cub right here from one image, and then the feet, and then like so on. So essentially I'm kind of Frankensteining, for lack of a better word, Frankensteining the creatures together, but also like keeping myself in check with making sure that everything looks good proportionally and anatomically. So essentially, this is the bottom sketch that I did. And so I did this on a piece of paper with a pencil. And so this was kind of like maybe the third iteration that I liked. And I just really liked this cute cub face. He's just so cute. And so essentially, I take a picture and I place it into the Photoshop file. And then I start with a base layer to see just, like how this is looking, what the proportions look like in relation to each other. And the cool thing about Photoshop is that if I decide like, oh, I don't really like this cub's butt over here, I'm not really a huge fan of his butt, I can change it. I can make it different because it's digital. So I can just go over here and get an eraser. It's saying I can't because it's a locked thing, but I can just erase it all if I so choose. So then this is the layer up, and so I'm kind of getting a bottom tone. And so what I mean by bottom tone is I look at the images, or at least I look at what the kind of overall tone is across the board for all of my creatures that I'm looking at. And so say if I'm looking at a mountain lion, it kind of has a specific color across the board that I can kind of build off of as a foundation. And so it's the foundation bottom tone essentially. And so I can either go darker or lighter with my colors. And then that one, so layers are interesting because you can place them in front or behind from other layers. And so I have this forelimb right here because I want the coat to be in front. Do you see that? So I have the coat in front that blocks that back leg. And so then face details come in. And so that's when I go over, whenever I start an illustration, I go over and do my face details first. So my eyes, my nose, my mouth, and then a little bit more coat, and then face coloration. And so basically what I like to do is I like to add on basically the lighter tones and then the darker tones as well. So if you zoom in, let's see here in the face. So essentially, I have the overall tone from the bottom tone. And then I kind of build up on the lighter tones. Like, oh, we have the zygomatic arch right here. And so we're going to make that a little lighter. And then we have kind of darker areas, so we bring it back. And so it's almost like a topographical map. And so you're making the lighter things come forward and the darker things go back. And so a lot of the times, I do this in real life and also digitally, there's a way to do this. When you're doing art like this, you can kind of get stuck in one mind frame and you kind of forget sometimes your proportions might be off. And so one way you can figure out if you're on track is to go up to view, then flip horizontal. Whoa! Did that change your perception at all? Maybe a little bit, especially if you're making an illustration and you are stuck in one mind frame. It can really help to see it in a different perspective. And so I do this with traditional media by holding my piece up to a mirror. And sometimes it's kind of like an awakening moment, like, whoa, that looks wrong. I don't know why I didn't see that before, but we need to fix that. And so that really helps for proportions. And sometimes you're just completely off, or sometimes you're on the right track. And so it's really helpful to go back and forth with flipping horizontal and flipping your views. And also another thing that you really need to get to do is save. Always save your file, no matter what, because as digital things go, sometimes your computer crashes and you might lose that file. So anyways, I don't know how much time I have left on my demo, but if you guys don't mind, I can do a little bit of drawing maybe on this little cub face right here because it's so cute. So essentially, I think that I'll make a new layer because after all, this cub is in front of the mom. And I think it would be nice to just kind of get its coat going, you know, like how back here mom has a pretty general coat. She's definitely not done, as you can see. She has this paw right here that's certainly not done, and more details of the coat. So essentially, I think that our little friend here could benefit. And one thing I haven't mentioned yet is I am using Photoshop brushes from my teacher, Justine Lee Hurton. And so normally when you have Photoshop, you have the general brushes. So you've got your hard round pressure size, and then like your Kyle's brushes or whatever. And so I have these cool brushes from my teacher that she made herself because you can make your own brushes in Photoshop, which is really cool. I'm pretty lazy, so I haven't made any brushes in Photoshop yet, but I'm lazy because of this really cool brush set. And so this brush set is really cool because there's oil, like oil kind of looking. One of them I'm using right now. I can make it a little bit bigger so you can see what it looks like. So, and what's my opacity here? Opacity is really important because if you just have 100% opacity all the time, oopsies. If you have 100% opacity all the time, it'll be dark like this. But if you do, or actually, there we go. If you have lower opacity, then you can have kind of layers as you make brush strokes. And it kind of mimics what painting looks like in real life. So we can get rid of that. Undo, 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 undo. Undo. Go away. There we go. So it's really cool with these brushes because, oh, come on now. Don't do me like that. So you have your oil brushes and you have acrylic brushes that are really cool, and your watercolor brushes. And I think there's also effects brushes. Yeah. And these brushes are available for sale if you want to get them yourself. They are on gumroad.com under Justine Lee Hurton. I don't know how I can get that to you, but probably with Gabe, I could put that in the chat later. But it's really awesome. They're only $10 and you can use all these brushes and they're super great. And the really cool thing about brushes on Photoshop is you can mix and match. And the more you mix and match, the more realistic it looks and the more kind of like brushy and feely it is. So, I don't know, we are kind of past my 20-minute mark for my demo. If Gabe wants to turn it over to questions, I can maybe do a little bit of gestural painting on my little cub here and answer questions if you guys have any questions. Yeah, sure.
Cool. So we can take some questions from the audience now. Um, so if anyone watching at home, if you want to ask Hannah your questions, go ahead and drop them in the chat, or you can send it to our Twitter or Instagram page, and we'll ask Hannah all of them as much as we can today. Our first question that I had was from Jessica. Is Photoshop more useful than Illustrator?
Ooh, really good question. Um, so they it's like a mom saying which children is your favorite, which child is your favorite. I love them in different ways. So you have Photoshop, which is really awesome, and you can do all sorts of things on it. Illustrator is really important for making um, really succinct line art. So in Illustrator, you have the ability to paint and make a painting and do whatever you want, but Photoshop just has just more variety in painting, more colors. I would say that Illustrator is really helpful for making your sketch if you want to not do what I did where I sketched um, in real life on traditional media, and then I took a photo and I put it in Photoshop. You can use Illustrator to make your base sketch first with the pen tool, and that's really helpful. And then because they're both Adobe products, you can easily link and place them with each other so that whatever changes you make in your Illustrator file, it will be transferred to your Photoshop file. So, and also Illustrator is really helpful. I had a project recently where I was doing a painting in Photoshop, but I had to convert it to vector. And so you can do that in Photoshop, but it's kind of, it's arduous and it has a lot of steps. But in Illustrator, you take your file from Photoshop, which is a raster image, and you put it in Illustrator and you image trace it, and it converts it to a vector image. And so it's a little different. Vectors are different looking and they have different usages. But I think that when you use these two products together, I think you get the most bang for your buck, essentially. But yeah, I like them both.
As a graphic designer, I prefer using Illustrator a little bit more, but I've been trying to use Photoshop every now and then. It's a great program, and there are also alternatives for those out there who are not able to get Photoshop. There's things like GIMP, right? And I can't remember the other program that's out there for like that kind of stuff. But there are free programs out there as well.
Mhm. And Procreate as well. I've heard if you have iPads and the like. I think you can have Procreate on your phone as well, right? I think so.
I think so. I think I might have used it a couple times to take
Yeah.
notes mostly.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
um, Here's another question from SharkMoon17. They're asking, what are some good reference books or scientific papers for up-to-date information on research?
Yeah, well, so I'd say when you are researching articles, definitely look at Science News because Science News will give you kind of a synopsis of what papers come out, and you can read through it, and they give you the actual link to the article so you can see it for yourself if you kind of want to get more in depth. A lot of articles, scientific articles, unfortunately, you can only access if you pay for it, but it's usually not very much. Or if you have a membership for a year, you can see an unlimited amount of scientific articles. But what I usually do is I go to Google Docs, I mean, sorry, Google Scholar, and I search. It's basically like Google, except smart Google. Like you search basically scientific articles instead of like how to bake brownies. And so you can search in Google Scholar and there'll be a bunch of articles that come up. And then on the far right side, you can see the free PDF version. And so if you're not able to purchase a article for any reason, you can look at that PDF version and get exactly what you need. All of the articles that I got in reference to make this particular illustration, I got through Google Scholar and were free PDFs because they're available like that. And also for anatomical books, I have general books. Let me see. Essentially, here. I looked at this particular book when I was referencing the anatomy of a lion in comparison with a saber-toothed cat. And so this is called an Atlas of Animal Anatomy for Artists. And so it has this kind of spooky looking horse skeleton on the front. But it's really helpful. It has a lot of these, and they're gorgeous illustrations in general. But essentially you can go through and it's extremely detailed anatomical illustrations of, like this one's a horse. I don't know if you can see that very well. But it's just really helpful and they outline everything that you need to know and need to be aware of when approaching certain illustrations. Yeah, I mean, I highly recommend this. There's a lot of great anatomy books out there, and this is just one of them. But, you know, go crazy. The anatomy books are everywhere. They're just awesome.
Um, let's see. We got a question from Jared McGowan who's asking, what are some reliable places to get some good brushes for feather and fur texturing?
Ooh. So I only have one of Justine Lee Hurton's set. And I'm going to mention her other sets if you go onto her gumroad.com website. So she has specific brushes for feather and fur texture, if my memory serves me. She basically makes these brushes for the express purpose of fur texture or feather texture, or like water, like she wants to replicate like a watercolor painting but digitally, so she has watercolor brushes. So I'd highly recommend going over there. And a lot of, like, honestly, the brushes that I have was the most expensive set at $10, but I have so many brushes, you know, like $10 for, I don't know, like at least 20 brushes. It's a really good deal. And so she's got other brushes, a brush set that are like between like $1 to $10. I definitely check that out.
Yeah, I actually went ahead and dropped the link in the chat, so go ahead and you can click on that link to find all those brushes and support some artists online.
Yeah, perfect. Thank you.
Here's a great question from Gary Latona. Do you know if the cubs would have a different color? And I guess that could lead into another question of how do we know what color extinct animals are?
Yeah, really good question. So it's basically really, really, really hard to get fossilized feathers and skin and fur. Like I don't think that there's fur fossils out there actually. But say for dinosaur fossils, there are really cool fossils. Like I think for Archaeopteryx, they know what color at least one of Archaeopteryx's feathers was black. And they know that because they zoomed in really, really, really like far into there, and they could see by the structure of the feather on the molecular, not the molecular, but very, very small level, how it would reflect the light, how it would take in the light. And so essentially, they realized that that feather was black. And so there's also other ways you can like check in on the structure of, I think they're called melanosomes, or I think so. And so you can see if you are capable, and if you find feather fossils, you can like look at the melanosomes and see their structures and you can see if the feathers have a certain color, which they do. But so for saber-toothed cats, and specifically for these cubs, there isn't, there is no kind of real fossils that indicate the color of the coat. And so you kind of have to work your sciencey brain and say, okay, well, big cats today, like they use camouflage and like they have all these different colors and stuff, but why? And so when you look into like, oh, like tigers have stripes because it's usually for like hunting at night and in very grassy, reedy areas. Or you have spotted leopards and stuff, and spots are indicators of nocturnal hunters kind of like prowling through the jungle, you know, it's like kind of like a moving target. And then as for mountain lions, or lions for that matter, they're very kind of pale and tan, maybe a little bit of red. And that's more because they are ambush predators, usually like in kind of like savanna, like scrub areas. And so there's a lot of yellow and green and like open areas. And so they blend into that in that sense. And so for the cubs, it's a little bit more tricky because you can look at lion cubs, which aren't crazily differently colored from mother adult lions, or adult lions for that matter. But I am going to use puma mountain lion coloration for the babies because they are more kind of spotted. And if you look at images, they're just a little bit darker and they kind of have a little bit of spotting on their stomach. And that is so that they are camouflaged and they stay hidden. And so from what I recalled from my research was that we don't have a lot of fossils of saber-toothed cat cubs because most likely they were for the first, I don't know, let's see, like for the first maybe 6 or 7 months of their life, from my notes, I think they were kept in dens, much like African lions today. When a mother has her babies, she separates herself from the pride and has her babies, keeps them safe, and then she introduces them to the pride. And so that's what they think happened with saber-toothed cats because they don't have any fossils of these cubs that young. And so where are they? Well, they're probably somewhere else from the dangerous place. And so if they're being kept out of danger, then probably they were camouflaged. But yeah, it's you got to use your sciencey brain. Like you come up with all of these kind of questions to ask yourself and then answers to kind of answering yourself. But essentially, as long as you make a good kind of fair assumption, like instead of saying that saber-toothed cats were all purple. Well, why? Why were saber-toothed cats purple? I don't know, because that would look cool. Like, no, like having kind of like a more grounded assumption based in like scientific literature and fact is much better than making your saber-toothed cats purple. Don't make your saber-toothed cats purple.
That would be fun to see, though, honestly.
Well, you know, I mean, like now that I'm thinking about it, it's like kind of like a acid trip Ice Age movie. Little...
Maybe like some like Star Wars creature where it's like purple saber tooths, like the Narglashes or whatever.
Very cool. That, yeah, I love your design. That would be so cool to see.
Here's another great question from Danielle Gordon. How far into your artist journey did you transition into digital art? Was it easy to transition or a completely fresh start?
Ooh. So, um, I would say that I didn't know it, but I was kind of prepping myself when I was little, when I was playing around on my Microsoft computer, our family Microsoft computer, on MS Paint. And I don't know if that dates me at all, but so MS Paint, for all of you millennials out there, or Gen Zs probably would not know about this. On your Microsoft computer, you could play around in this free program on your Microsoft computer where you'd basically paint, and it had very limited capabilities. I mean, I don't know if you can still access it, but it would be so fun to play around with MS Paint nowadays. But essentially, I was kind of giving myself training wheels for digital art through MS Paint. And I didn't know it at the time. I was just kind of, like messing around on my computer. And for a while too, like as I like entered into high school and college, I kind of had like, I don't know, like maybe like a negative assumption of digital art, like, oh, digital art, like traditional art's where it's at, like kind of like in the same way that, oh, like why are all the Disney movies computer generated now? Like, what about that like 2D awesomeness, like Disney Renaissance? But when I was really starting to wrap my mind around potentially being a science illustrator after college, I was like, yeah, digital art is really important, and it's being really used across the board. And so when I was applying to my grad program at Cal State Monterey Bay, I invested in taking a class in Illustrator and like feeling it out. And it very much felt like starting at the bottom, like I'm doing MS Paint again. And like one of the classes was like making a snowman, literally like make a circle and another circle, another circle, and you made a snowman. So it did feel a little disheartening at first, because it did feel like starting from the bottom. But I got into the grad program, and then once I was there, I learned so much about digital art, and it really, really helped me to kind of wrap my mind around it, because it is a little bit different because it's digital, and so there's just kind of a disconnect at first, and you're not really, it's just kind of weird, like it's not tangible, but it's so helpful, and you can do so many things with it. So I highly recommend it. And if you can chip away at it, and you might feel kind of silly at first, like you're back in MS Paint, but you'll get there. Practice makes perfect.
Yeah, I felt nostalgia when you said MS Paint because I remember as a kid playing around in there and trying to make Pokemon characters for
Oh
for my own
yeah.
side stories.
Oh yeah. MS Paint.
Let's see. Sebastian is asking, during the process of drawing their design, if there is a missing or unsolved part of the animal, what do you do with it?
Ooh, yeah. If there is a missing or unsolved part of the animal, so you have a couple of things you can do. You can either kind of wing it, and you can look at like relatives of this particular creature. If this was a dinosaur or something, and they only had the feet of this dinosaur, you can go and you can look at the lineage of where this dinosaur lies in relation to other dinosaurs. And so you can look at other kind of references from other dinosaurs to see like, oh, well, so this ancestor had feathers and kind of had like a crest on its head, then maybe this has a crest on its head and it has feathers. So you can work with that, or you can even reach out to the experts. Like I did a illustration with Guanlong dinosaur, and at that point I was already talking to Andy Farkey in my grad program, and I reached out to him because he said, yeah, if you have any questions about like dinosaurs or anything, like let me know. And so when you ask the experts, they're going to know a lot more than you, and they might have a better idea of where you can go from there when you don't have all the pieces in there. And yeah, so I would say look at the relatives, see how they look, and make ground like good assumptions from that, or ask an expert. So I think that would probably be the best way to go.
And today with access to social media and stuff, it's pretty easy to get a hold of an expert. Just send them a message on Twitter or Instagram, and most of us are happy to answer.
Yeah, absolutely.
Let's see. Here's a question from Jessica. Is there a course for scientific illustrating that you recommend? I know there's a difference between American and Canadian schools. And I guess from there also, Hannah, if you could talk a little or give some advice for folks who are looking to go to school for science illustration.
Yeah, well, from what I understand, there are different institutions across America and potentially at least a couple in Canada that I know of that deal with courses in science illustration. So I would say look into it, and there's definitely a lot of science illustration is based with medical illustration, which is a little bit different because you can go to school for medical illustration and then you can end up drawing dinosaurs. But usually medical illustration's pretty hardcore, and it takes longer, and you basically illustrate human anatomy exclusively. But so as for me, I went to the Cal State Monterey Bay grad program, which is 1 year, and it deals in science illustration, not just medical illustration. And so what that means is that basically they give you the whole gambit of different materials you can use, and they teach you how to do all this stuff, but what you draw is primarily up to you. And they do give you advice and stuff, but if you are a paleontology nerd, you can, if you have an assignment for pen and ink, you can draw a dinosaur. Or if you have an assignment for an acrylic painting, you can draw like an early mammal or something. So I'd say, and they also too have these great classes in the summer. I'm not quite sure what that looks like for this year in particular, because they're usually in person, but there may be, like last year in the summer, my graduate program at Cal State Monterey Bay did remote classes. And so you could look into that. And I believe that there was a great class last year in field sketching by my teacher, Andrea Dingledine. And people really, really enjoyed that. And Andrea is amazing at field sketches. And so essentially, just kind of like put out your feelers. There's probably either going to be programs that you can attend, or those programs have classes that you can take remotely, potentially. So, yeah, research it and see what you find.
Thanks, Hannah. I have a question for you, actually. For science illustration, it's all very much grounded in facts, right? Or in the science, the things that we know, because you're trying to reconstruct these extinct creatures or things that we know are alive. How much does your, I would say, inspirations or imagination and artistry, how much of that goes into science illustration? Is it 50-50, or is it more science versus imagination? When you start to create these kind of things?
Yeah, I think that's a really good question because there is the rational science bit of every science illustration, but then there's the creative artistic bit, because they're two words, science and illustration. So essentially I would say if I were to make percentages, probably I would say like maybe 50-50, or maybe like 40%, 60% for either or, depending on the day, essentially, because there'll be days where you need all of those facts and you need all that science to start with, or if you have a burning question, then you need to rely on science. But then with the creative aspect and the imagination, I think that really comes into play when you're trying to convey this illustration. So, like, yeah, there's saber-toothed cats that raise their babies for a really long time. So they probably were in dens and they like licked them like other cats or whatever. But how do you portray that? How do you convey that kind of sense, that juxtaposition of having a ferocious kind of mother saber-toothed cat and her babies? Like, how do you convey that kind of almost like intimate and quiet moment? And that's where the creativity and imagination comes in. So, yeah, I think that it's mostly 50-50 because there's part of you that is grounded in the facts, and then part of you that uh, needs to relay those facts in a visually pleasing format. Because you could just do it in MS Paint, and I don't know how great that would look creativity wise. Probably not the best creativity wise or imagination wise, but you use your imagination quite a bit, and especially if you ground it in fact and scientific literature, it can be pretty powerful. It can be pretty cool to have a science brain imagination. I don't know how well that sounded. A science, a, a super science creativity brain,
I
something
like
like that.
that. I like that a lot. So I think we're going to have our last question for today. This is from Jared. What is your experience in the best ways to market your paleo art for museums and other institutions?
Yeah, so I would say that having an Instagram is really key to furthering your your pieces out into the world. You can also do like other stuff. Like I know that like DeviantArt is still used, and then there's other websites that kind of I'm forgetting at the moment. But essentially, having an art Instagram is really important because that projects you into the art Instagram community, which is pretty vast. I mean, I exclusively follow art Instagrams, and it's a huge community, and it's really cool. Like you as well as you can be potentially intimidated by these Instagram artists because a lot of them are really good. You can also find a lot of inspiration from them and community from them, a sense of community that is, and also too, if you want to reach out to institutions, email them. Like reach out and email them and be like, "Hi, like I'm a science illustrator and I think that what you do is really cool. I was wondering, I saw that you made a publication last week about saber-toothed cats and their moms. And I was wondering if you might want to use my illustration. You know, not that I'm gonna do that right after this, but it's it's something it's a little scary to think about that you're sending out these cold emails, but honestly they work. And even if people don't respond, that's okay because you put yourself out there. And a lot of the times people will respond and they'll be like, "Oh, hi, nice to meet you. I don't have anything planned right now, but I'll think of you in the future." And that's networking. So, I mean, I would say that that's a really great way to start. If you want to get your word out, get a nice Instagram going and email people. Get the word out.
Thanks, Hannah.
Yeah.
Well, speaking of that, there were a lot of great questions we didn't get a chance to ask today in the chat. So, if folks want to connect with you, where's the best place for them to do that, or even get to see more of your artwork?
Yeah, well, so you can go to my website to see more of my illustration endeavors at hannahcaisse.com. And then you can also follow me on my Instagram handle, which is at synap underscore sida, which is a play on words for synapsid mammals. Uh-oh, my nerd's coming out. Um, and yeah, if you want to shoot me an email, I'm at hannah.caisse@gmail.com. Yeah, I'm here for you guys. If you have more questions, let me know.
Well, thank you so much for joining us today, Hannah. That was really cool, and there was a lot of really cool information that I didn't know about for science illustration. Thank you all so much for joining us today on our very first part of Making Monsters for Discovery Day Online. If you tune in again at 11:30 today, we are going to be joining our featured speaker, renowned science illustrator Terrell Whitlatch, who I am particularly excited for. Terrell is amazing science illustrator, creature designer who did a lot of the work, or all the work, for Star Wars Episode 1. And for those of you who know me, who know that I love Star Wars, I'm trying to contain myself for later today. And then at 4 o'clock today, we are going to be joined again by Hannah and all of our previous science illustration interns from the Alf Museum for our special panel, Careers in Science Illustration. So we'll see you all then. And thank you again, Hannah, so much for joining us. This is really cool.
Yeah, thank you for having me, Gabe. I'm really excited to see Terrell later. She's definitely one of my, if not the inspiration to my illustration ideals. If I were her, I would be happy. I'm also really excited to do the panel later, and I can't wait to see you then.
And I drop all the stuff in the chat, and we'll add all the links for Hannah in the description below. And as usual, make sure you like and subscribe to our channel for more stories from the world of paleontology. Thank you all so much, and we'll see you at 11:30.